on today's StoryBeat.
When you go out to play, you really want to put the audience at ease. You want to make sure that they're okay. So when you kind of reverse it and think, oh my God, they're all looking at me, and what am I going to do? Your goal is to put the audience at ease, have them enjoy. It's all about the music. It's all about the play. It's all about what you're trying to express. You know, the music, that's what it's about.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the highly renowned classical clarinetist David Singer, has performed many times at Carnegie Hall. He was a principal member and soloist with the Grammy Award-winning Orpheus Chamber Orchestra for 36 years and is featured on many of the group's 70 CDs on Deutsche Grammophon. David began with Orpheus when the group was playing for free. He's played with many of the world's greatest classical musicians, including legends like Yehudi Menuhin, Itzhak Perlman, Rudolf Serkin, and Yo-Yo Ma, among others. David has also performed at the White House with music from Marlboro and the Lincoln Center Chamber Music Society for Presidents Carter and Clinton. David's recently published memoir, From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall, is more than a musician's autobiography. Its inspiring narrative will resonate with anyone who's faced life's challenges head-on. It's an ode to the power of never giving up while giving oneself every chance to succeed. I've read David's book and found it to be a fascinating, uplifting reflection of a life in music that's been full of challenges, triumphs, and the transformative power of music. If you enjoy stories about artists succeeding despite difficult obstacles, I highly urge you to read David's entertaining memoir. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored to welcome the exceptional clarinetist David Singer to StoryBeat today. David, welcome to the show.
Wow, what an introduction. I have something to live up to now.
Yeah, well, I think you have already done that, and it's well earned. So let's go back in time just a little bit. How old were you when you very first became interested in music?
I've loved music for a long time. I've mostly back in the late 50s, 60s, I was listening, to Elvis or to country western music. Later in the mid 60s, I was interested. I loved the Beatles. I would say that the most spectacular year that I enjoyed with my family, and really has everything to do with how I became interested in music, was the year that my dad took a sabbatical. He was a teacher at the local high school, band director, from 1961, August 1st, 1961 to August 1st, 1962. We went to Europe for a whole year. It was just amazing. We were in New York, we were in Paris, we were in Vienna. And when we got to Vienna, he called up the principal clarinetist of the Vienna Philharmonic, one of the great orchestras. My boy plays the clarinet. Will you teach him? And to my surprise, I couldn't believe he did that. I just had started the clarinet. He took me as a student. And within a few weeks, Professor Yettel invited me to sit with him in the Vienna Philharmonic during opera season. You're very familiar with Broadway and all of the shows and things. Well, this, in terms of opera, was the top of the top. I mean, if the baseball analogy would have been like being a bat boy with the New York Yankees or Pittsburgh Pirates or whatever. So I'm sitting in this great orchestra, and it starts, the show that begins. I remember La Boheme or Tosca or any of the, you're looking up at the costumes, the color, the sets, the lighting, and the voices, the music around me, having these stories. A young woman and a young man, they meet, and they're both poor and they're both cold, and they get together and they have this relationship. I mean, just all these different stories of love, of sometimes lust. I mean, to all kinds of things, and stories that completely related with with humanity, with me, even as a 12-year-old. And so when I thought that once upon a time classical music was written by people hundreds of years ago and had no Europeans for that matter being there, the music surrounding me is all in Technicolor, and it was just something that I never forgot.
Well, you were seeing the show from a position that the audience never sees. Only the musicians see it from the pit, right?
Absolutely.
Well, that gives you a perspective that's truly unique. And at 12, I can imagine that was extremely riveting to you watching it.
Absolutely. It was. So that really made me feel like, wow, that's something, all of the feelings, all of the emotions, that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to play and express emotions that the composer was expressing. Those dots and dashes on the page mean something. They come to life if you really look into who wrote it, when did they write it, and what it means, and then to express them to an audience that really...
It's all about passion, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. For anything what we do. Yeah.
It is, because what you're doing is music is an expression of emotion, as you just alluded to. It's not just a technical thing.
No, absolutely.
Did you know at that time, as you were sitting there, that you were likely to be in music business your whole life?
No, I had no. I mean, it was something that attracted me. Baseball, I loved baseball, and then music became the next real passion, and so I did both for a while. But baseball didn't work out because I was in the outfield playing little league or senior league, and I used to pray that the ball wouldn't be hit to me, or I didn't want to be up with the bases loaded. I wasn't, I told my dad, and he said, "No, baseball, not for you."
If you're not interested in the ball coming to you, you have a problem if you want to be in baseball.
Right.
So now that you've published your memoir, I'm curious, do you also now think of yourself as a writer?
No. I mean, really, honestly, the last English class I took was in high school. I went to the Curtis Institute of Music, which is a very well-known, highly respected school. But really, when you graduate, you get a piece of paper, or at least when I went to school there, they give you a piece of paper that says you can play. You can play an instrument. Well, good luck making a living with that.
Really?
It's just crazy. And so the book resonates with people who are having a hard time, from cab driver to Carnegie Hall. Well, I was in both worlds. I played for the President of the United States, and the same day went back to New York to drive my cab.
We're going to talk about that in a bit, because we're going to cover the book in some depth. I'm just fascinated as people figure out how they get to where they eventually get, because you're sitting there as a child, you have no idea whether you're ever going to be playing in front of a crowd or as a professional. That's not something that's in your head. You're just barely trying to figure out how to make the instrument work. So along the way, as you were proceeding, you obviously have written this nice, healthy autobiography. Did you keep a journal along the way? How did you remember all these stories?
It's a good question. Well, at my age, 103, I mean, it's long-term memory is easier than what I had for breakfast. It's just one of those things. No, I kept, I always had a date book every year. You always have a date book. You always have a schedule. And I have a stack of date books in my garage. I never threw them away. I also have correspondence from my parents. I wrote to my parents, and they would write me back from, my parents. I grew up in LA. I have cards that I would write when I was any parts of the world, or so, and then also, remember certain things. But those are primarily correspondence and my date books.
So the date books then triggered memories.
Yeah, and it really started out as a kind of a game. I'm sort of supposed to be retired, but I'm still playing concerts, and people ask me to play, and lots of times I do benefits for people. But what did I do in the late 50s? What did I do in the 60s? I would just sort of put down highlights, and again, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. And then starting to kind of fill it in, and it kind of took on a life of its own.
I think the listeners should pay attention to what David's saying, because it's great if you can keep some kind of written memory of what you're doing, whether it's a date book or a journal or whatever it might be, that's very helpful. If you're thinking to yourself, someday I may want to write my story, my autobiography. Why the clarinet? What appealed to you early on, and what appeals to you still?
I had a crush on a girl. I was on I guess it was about the third or fourth grade, and I just would see her from afar, Amory Rocky. I remember her name. And she was going to enter a talent show. And so I came back to my house one night and I told my dad, I'd like to enter a talent show. And he says, in a very supportive way, you don't know how to do anything. So he was, as the band director, he'd bring home instruments and the cello and the trumpet and all this kind of stuff. Nothing worked. But then he brought home the clarinet. So the clarinet was the easiest for me, the most natural. So to answer your question, that's why I played the clarinet. It just seemed to work. So I learned a song about 1 minute long and entered the talent show, won, beat her, and she wanted nothing to do with me after that.
But you found your great love, which was the clarinet.
Well, I didn't ever think of it that way, but it's interesting because one of my teachers at Curtis, the principal oboist in the Philadelphia Orchestra, John Delancey, he told me that in all romantic relationships that you might have, the clarinet will never leave you.
So where did you get your training? Was it just at Curtis or was it elsewhere? Did Professor Yettel also train you? How did you get training?
When I was 12, I learned from him. I went back to LA, and then again, my dad found out who was some of the best clarinet players in town. Richard Lesser was one who ended up principal clarinet in Israel Philharmonic, and then Mitchell Lurie he was principal clarinetist in Chicago and then became the principal clarinetist with Walt Disney. So he was on all those cartoons that were always playing. He taught me. And so I had the best teachers.
Well, LA is filled with phenomenal musicians for the studios. What for you makes a great piece of music great? Why is this piece appeal to people more than others? What is it about music that makes people, they like it for one reason or another? Do you know?
I think a lot of it is subjective. You could take a look at a painting and somebody will see something beautiful, or there's a picture of Edvard Munch, however you pronounce it, of a woman screaming on a bridge. So some people would look like this, right? And others would say, wow, look at that, But to me, it's interesting because when I took my sabbatical, one of them from Montclair State University, where I was a professor, I worked with composers at SC, actually, and UCLA, and a few other places. And I would play music that they had written, and they would ask me, so what do you think? And so I told them that the composer wants to create. They want to create, but you don't do it in a vacuum. What you write, you have to give us a reason to want to play your piece, right? It's like you have to write a story that people want to do as a play. I mean, you can be by yourself and everything like that, but and you want to come up, you think about Beethoven, and he just wrote what he felt. Well, he was a genius. I mean, just an incredible genius. Mozart, they didn't necessarily, although Mozart was told when he wrote his operas, the first one was not particularly happy. And they said, listen, if you want us to do your opera, it's got to be more happy. It's got to be more entertaining. And so he did that. But I told them that, why should I play this piece if, where's the feel? Where's the emotion? What are you trying to express? That's very important. A composer told me that he wrote his piece because he heard his son in the next room playing video games. And he heard the sounds of these video games, and he was like so moved that his son was there playing video games. So he was writing, boop, 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 beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, like whatever, Pac-Man or whatever it is. That's fine, but it's not going to inspire me to play the piece. I look for something, maybe a melody that's going to be able to be expressive. Something that makes me feel something. And it doesn't have to be beautiful. It can be dissonant, it can be angry, it can be funny, but something move me, make me feel something.
Surely you have played some pieces of music hundreds, if not thousands of times, and you've done scales probably, I'm guessing hundreds, if not tens of thousands of times. Um, do you ever get bored playing anything that you're using to practice?
I mean, I play scales a lot, but I do it in different ways. I mean, it's like a vocabulary, it has to be, you have to have control of your hands. You have to have control of your air. You have to have the feel of 3, 4 registers of sounds. And then you can play whatever. And those are the things that need to be practiced, kind of oiled, like the Tin Man. You have to really be able to be very facile with things. So I really don't. I have to say, though, the art of, I mean, just writing something is also the book. I have an audio book version coming out in the next few months, and doing it through Amazon Audible ACX. I think that's what they call it. That's very expressive too. How do you read? It's like a play, I guess, right? It's my script, and so it can really come to life. It's like playing, except I don't have to worry about reeds or my instrument working or not. It's just your voice, So it's very, very enjoyable. So I like doing that.
So there's a warmth and a richness in your sound. When I listen to the recordings of you playing, there's a kind of a warmth to it, which you do get on certain clarinet players, but not all of them. Sometimes it's a little sharper. What is it you do? Do you do anything to get that warm, rich tone?
I have it in my head, the sound that you have. I think the voice that you have has some kind of relationship to what you hear. And so my biggest influence still, when I was in Vienna, listening to the beautiful sounds that they make in Vienna, the clarinets. It's really the reed and mouthpiece. I don't play their kind of reed and mouthpiece because I couldn't. It didn't work for me. But that sound is always in my head, and so I always try to. That's what I hear, and that's what is pleasing to me. So that's what I do.
Who do you think is the greatest clarinetist of all time?
Well, I mean, in terms of certainly popular music, I mean, Benny Goodman. I mean, Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw. Today, there are many who are fantastic. Sabina Meyer plays in Europe a lot. There are many who I admire, and they're like singers. They're playing an instrument, they're playing the clarinet, but you're not really aware. It's just a voice. It's a voice that's incredibly flexible.
How interesting. Because as a writer, you're trying to get to where you're expressing your voice in writing. And you did that successfully in your book, but that you were writing about yourself. So it would be a little easier, I think, to get to your voice writing about yourself. But if you're writing fiction or if you're writing a journalism piece or something like that, it's a little harder to develop what you call your voice. Correct me if I'm wrong, you get your voice as a clarinetist by practicing a lot so that it becomes second nature.
By practicing a lot and by listening, by having the experiences wherever you would find it. For me, was going to the opera in Vienna. When I was 20, I went back to Europe. They had this, and they still do have what they call Stehplatz, where you stand. And then I didn't have any money, so you get there very early. You pay your $2 or something, and you run up the stairs 5 flights, and you're kind of elbowing people. Not really, but I mean, you get up to a place where at the very top, where they have these metal bars, and you are standing behind, you tie your scarf there, and that's where you're going to be standing. So in that hall, the Musikverein, not the Musikverein, the Staatsoper, that's where I was 12 years old, sitting in the pit with the Vienna Philharmonic. Then as a 20-year-old, I was way at the top, at the cheapest seats, standing for 5-6 hours, including being in line. And then later, just in the last few years, I went with my wife and we sat in the best seats in the house, including, which is not necessarily the best, we sat in the front row in the middle, right behind the conductor. So I had been from the pit to way at the top, to the boxes, or in one concert, we were right in the front of the orchestra. There was the Vienna Philharmonic right there. I could reach out and touch them.
You're in that prime spot right where the conductor is, so you're getting all the sound focused on you.
The sound and their kind of grunts and moans and almost hit with sweat, So it's kind of neat.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about Orpheus and chamber music. What constitutes a chamber orchestra versus a symphony orchestra?
Chamber orchestra, like chamber music is smaller. For us, the obvious thing was that we didn't have a conductor. And so, you had in the beginning, as you said, my book is about overcoming obstacles. One of them, we started out playing for free, as you noted. And then we got opportunities to play, and very fast we became pretty well known. And I think in the 80s, 90s, we were the top chamber orchestra in the world.
Well, how did it get formed in the first place? How does that happen? You have no conductor, you're working for free, clearly you're not known to start. How does that happen?
What happened was someone named Julian Pfeiffer, a cellist, was at Juilliard, and he had friends who he liked playing with. And not everyone was wanted, first of all, to play necessarily in an orchestra. That was the easiest. I mean, certainly not easy to get a job in an orchestra. Musicians wanted to have another way of being able to make music. So I was part of discussions, not in the very beginning, 73 is when it started, probably around 1977. We were still meeting uptown at a restaurant called Empire Szechuan on 95th and Broadway over cold noodles. I remember that stuff, talking about what kind of orchestra we think we should have. Should we have a big orchestra? But if we have a big orchestra, how are we going to do it without a conductor? People are going to be sitting so far away from each other. How do we do this? So also, how do we do it? Are there going to be many people who are going to be like soloists? Or are we going to have a few of first chair people, and then the others will be kind of followers? Are we going to do it that way? How does it work if you have many leaders? Can we do it with what they later call a flat management style, or what are we going to do? So we came to the conclusion, at least in the winds and brass, that everyone should be kind of like a soloist. And although that created problems too, because with most music, there's a first clarinet and a second clarinet, first oboe, second oboe, first horn, second horn. So who's going to play second? Who's going to play first? And there's, sometimes differences of opinion. So a lot of things had to be worked out. We also listened to old recordings. What conductors do we really like? And what kind of style were we going to play? So there was a lot of things going. It could be a play, I guess. I mean, it's starting out. So we ended up making many CDs for Deutsche Grammophon, which was at the time the top classical recording label in the whole world, 70 recordings. We were asked, we played in Vietnam and all over the place. Anyway, we were asked to perform. There's a club in New York City of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. They're all CEOs. They wanted us to show them how we make it work, flat management, where we have X number of rehearsals, 3 or 4 rehearsals, and then have to play it in Carnegie Hall. How do you make a world-class product in a few rehearsals? So we would have them come to our first rehearsal, and it was sort of chaotic. And people were disagreeing, and no, we should try it like that. No, we should, conflict resolution and being a good listener. Everyone was experienced at playing chamber music. So chamber music, 1 to a part, no conductor. So we were all used to playing without a conductor. We also found that it was a good idea to have whoever was going to play the lead parts for that particular piece, and it would change all the time. But whoever's playing principal parts would get together before the orchestra would get together and decide how fast this should go, what kind of feeling are we trying to create or recreate, who's going to give the cue here, who's going to give the cue there. that kind of thing. We would sort of make decisions. And then when we brought it to the group, sometimes the last chair violinist would raise her hand, no, I don't agree, and we should do, but there was less and less of that as time went on, and the corps kind of led the rehearsal, and it would go it was a little more organized.
It's the ultimate act of collaboration. I can't imagine anything being more collaborative than a group of people getting together and figuring out how to start a piece on the same moment with no conductor, nobody giving you a downbeat. How would you start a piece? What would happen?
It depends on the piece. So I was asked by the Thornton School of Music at SC. Did you go to SC?
I went to SC and UCLA.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. So I was asked to work with the orchestra of the Thornton School and a la Orpheus. So in other words, the first concert of the year, the first half of the program, they wanted to do it Orpheus style without the conductor. So they were going to play a Rossini overture, which begins with a snare drum, like that, really loud. And so we got to everyone's really good at SC. I mean, they're really talented, bright, right? And so they're all ready to play. And of course, there's no conductor. And I'm just sitting there. I say, okay, play. And they didn't know what to do. They had no idea what to do. So I said, well, who plays first? And they looked, the string players, they didn't know. I mean, it was, and then the way in the back, the snare drum guy raised his hand. I play. I play. And then so who do you think should start the piece? Who do you think should give the cue for the first piece, for the first note when it starts? And the concertmaster says, we're going to take the first cue from the way in the back for the snare. Yes, he has. In this case, it was a male. He has the solo right from the beginning. So then you hear this. I said, wait a second. What dynamic are you supposed to be playing? And it says, well, double forte, loud. And I said, well, and he said, I'm scared. I don't want to play something by myself really loud. So this is how we started. And like a conversation, sitting at a table, you're listening to someone speaks and they have something that they did last night or whatever, they're bringing something to the attention, and oh, really? What happened? And then somebody else, like a play, it's a play. It's what it is. And we each have our script. Our part is our script. And so that's the way you put a piece together. So in romantic music, it could start with the bassoon and clarinet. It could then go to the flute, oboe, and the strings have not as important a part. Then it can be in the string. So it really moves. The conversation moves all over. And so you have to know what you're doing to make it work.
Classical music is a conversation within the orchestra, isn't it?
It is a conversation. I try to relate things to students in terms of their lives. So when I was working, I had a class in music appreciation. I would work about one of the sections of the course was about opera, and I would show them from YouTube sometimes a piece about Don Giovanni, who thought he was God's gift to women. I said, any of you women out there know anybody who thinks he's God's gift? Everybody raised their hand. And then there was Carmen, who was a very sexy woman of the street, I guess you'd have to say, who seduces a policeman to get her out of jail, and he runs away with her, and then in his life, it doesn't end up very well. That's kind of a conversation. I guess I'm trying to think that maybe popular music, the Beatles had the most beautiful melodies sometimes. I guess in classical music, it's definitely a kind of a conversation for sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The pieces themselves are internally conversations musically. I don't mean literal words. It's obviously music, but I think a really great piece of music, it feels like there's a conversation going on within the orchestra, and that the one piece is responding to the others, et cetera, and it gets moved, it gets louder, it gets angrier, it gets softer, it gets sweeter, whatever that might be, and it's very much a conversation. So how do you go from being in a chamber orchestra to going into a quartet or a trio, which you've done a lot of too? What are those differences?
Orpheus was like a chamber music group, a string quartet on steroids. Really, I mean, it was 20 of us playing as if we were 4 or 5. That's what the way we were trying to make it work. You had to have some ideas, but most important is that you had to be a good listener and be willing to try things that you didn't necessarily agree with.
That's what makes a great collaboration work, is that you're willing to listen to what the others are doing. If it's one other person that you're collaborating with, or 100 people, if you're listening to what the other people are saying and in their needs, and you can work your way through it so that it's cooperative and collaborative, that's what makes it work.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's now when you have a conductor, it's a dictatorship. I guess there are different ways of directing. I guess some directors give the actors more leeway and some maybe less, but generally it's all about, you got to follow the conductor. It's all about, watch me, and that's what it's all about. So you're more passive generally. Most of the people in the orchestra are more passive. When you don't have a conductor, you're more actively involved. So that's something that I think is wonderful. I created a program for very young children, which has really saved my life probably, because what I was doing during the day regularly was selling welding rod, climbing fences and running from guard dogs, selling welding rod. So it gave the kids the opportunity to create music. And so that was something that was sort of like chamber music.
So that's clearly in your book. We'll have a conversation now about From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall. Tell the listeners a little bit more detail what the thrust of the book is, what From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall is about. I know it's your story, but what makes it unique, do you think?
One of the things that I find that people were kind of surprised about is that I talk about my failures. I talk about losses. I talk about heartbreak and what I did to overcome some of those disappointments. Being in, for me, a kind of a dead end job. What did I do? How did I get out of that? How did I turn my life into what it became? And winning Grammy awards. I was a full professor at the university. I didn't get a bachelor's degree, but I was able, because of the group that I was in and people that I was playing with and recording with, they wanted me on their faculty. And so I had tenure at a corner office. I could see New York City from my office. It was like a dream. When I was thinking of my first teaching job, catching a bus at 20 degrees, waiting for a bus for an hour on a street corner when I was like 18, taking a bus, walking literally a mile to the school once I got to Cinnaminster, New Jersey. And the kids, if they didn't show up, I didn't get paid. I got nothing. And so that was my first teaching job to being a tenured full professor and all of this. So it's been quite a journey, but I thought it would be helpful for people to learn that, especially artist biographies or athletes, they don't talk about when they lost too much. They just don't. People, I don't know, people on a podcast, they're not going to talk so much about having to do certain things in their lives that they may not necessarily, especially at the time. I didn't want anybody to see me driving a cab, all of that stuff.
You needed to earn a living, right?
You got to make a living. That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I have taught many times that the things that you're reading in the trade magazines, the trade papers, and things that are industry specific, you're usually reading about things that have succeeded or are on their way to success, or they have been created. Even if they fail, ultimately, they actually got funded, et cetera, et cetera. You're reading about the successes. What you're not reading about are the dozens and dozens and dozens of failures where somebody's tried to get a play, a movie, a concert, an opera, whatever on, and never got there. You're not reading about that. You're only reading about the things that are happening or they have happened.
Right. That's exactly right. How do you recover from something like that? And one of the things was kind of an acronym. The word is SCORE, SCORE. It helps me. It's a creative visualization, a positive visualization that you do before maybe a job interview, before a speech, before whatever, a concert, a play, whatever when you're going to do something that's going to be stressful. there are ways to prepare. And so score represents S, has to do with self-discipline. Do the work. If it's a part that's going to be hard to memorize, do the work. That's very important. Practice. If you're going to do an interview, find out about the company, all that kind of stuff. That's very important. Do the work. Self-discipline. But that's the only physical stuff with this acronym. So C has to do with concentration. Concentrate on sending all negative energy away. I'm having a bad hair day, whatever it is. I don't feel great. I'm overweight. Whatever. It's amazing when you really think about negative thoughts. They're there, and so we recognize them and throw them away because they don't do you any good. O has to do with optimism. And this is what you can do before, like, you're going to sleep. You're just lying, in your bed and you're thinking about it. So O, you close your eyes. So O has to do with optimism. Think about when you've been successful. Think about what happened. How did you feel? And this is also going to be a success for you. Oh, so that's optimism. SCOR, relaxation from fear. Fear won't help you. In fact, it could hurt you. Fear is, people before they go out to do something can be frightened. And they have this fear. They can't explain exactly what it is. I'm going to be a failure. No, it's bad. You want to throw it away because there's no place for that. So fear, you have to recognize, not only will it not help you, it will hurt you. So a relaxation from fear. And E, enjoyment. Love what you do. Find something that you really like about whatever it is that you're doing. That whatever it is that you're presenting, whatever it is that you are going to talk about. So it relates to everyone. With those 5 SCORE, that has helped me a lot, attain much more than I ever thought I was going to be able to attain. Playing solo, very difficult for me. Well, I played solo with really great players behind me, and performed with some of the greatest musicians. You can almost name anybody who's played in the United States, and I probably have played with them. It certainly helped me a lot. So I think so that's something else that I think people can get from the book.
So the great mythologist Joseph Campbell used to famously say, "Follow your bliss, and the money will follow."
Not so much money, but I'm doing fine,
But that's the same concept of, do something that makes you happy, that you want to do, not something that you are told to do or you have to do. It's something that you are passionate about. Again, where there's that word passion, which is a very important word. You write very personally in the book about your personal experiences in your life, and it's very moving, and it's harrowing. Some of it's quite harrowing, especially as a kid. You were in difficult times. You write about your father having suffered PTSD in World War II, and that he had rages. And I'm just curious, how did you deal with that in your life? And how do you think that then motivated you to become the person that you are? How did you handle that?
First of all, I drove me I couldn't fail. I didn't have a safety net financially, and I didn't have really a safety net, at least for my parents, psychologically. There was no looking back. And so whatever I did, I had to make sure that I was going to be able to take care of myself. Fear of failure, I guess that's common. It's a great motivator, and how do you recover from being, experiencing child abuse? And it's not easy to talk about, but that was my situation. And so with some psychological help and that kind of thing, they had their own lives. And writing the book also helped me understand that they had their traumas in their lives growing up. And because I go back in time with my dad, who lived in Eastern Europe with his parents, but then his dad came to the United States way before he sent for the rest of the family, 1933, which is when Hitler came to power in Germany. And it wasn't long after that where, if in the book, I have a picture of my extended family with my dad as basically a 10-year-old kid with a kind of a hula hoop. It was a strange round thing that I guess one of his toys. He was a stuttering little boy clutching onto his parents' skirts. And then 10 years later, he was awarded a Bronze Star at the Battle of the Bulge. He was a fierce warrior and soldier. So he had his demons, and my mom had hers. 6 months old, they went from Kiev to they immigrated to the United States, ran into the Depression, had no job, had no money. I mean, it was just terrible, terrible things. And I don't know about the abuse maybe that they suffered. So they did the best they could. They did kind of apologize to me for what happened. There's a healing, you don't forget, but it's you can sort of forgive in a way.
We are, as humans, an amalgam of all of our experiences. One experience leads to the next, et cetera, et cetera. And so I am curious, as a performer, do you think that there's something from that era of your life that motivates you on stage to perform in a certain way, to be a better musician, to play things a certain way? Do you think that that's had an impact on you?
Oh, it's a really interesting question. Well, whatever I was going to do, I wanted to just do very well. And I thought it was that there was an opportunity to make people to help people feel better. So music was something that I could do. So as long as I could really get involved with the music, I did a play with Stockard Channing. She was, she played Roxy in Grease and 6 Degrees of Separation. She did some. Oh, she was in West Wing. She was the wife of the president. We did this play called The Lady and the Clarinet. Well, you know which role I played. I was the only one on stage with her. And it went for an hour and a half or something. And the play was interesting. You'd be interested. It was all about the past loves of her life. It was about 3 or 4 different relationships. And I would play music of the time in the background, and they would dance, or then they would go through their thing, that whatever happened with the beauty and the love, and then the going away, and then arguing, and then the man would leave, and then she'd come to me, and so there was this communication. There was these different things. So it was the end of the play. By the end of the play, I've been with her the whole time. She ends up in love with me. So that was kind of interesting. It inspires me to want to help the audience feel something. And so that's very important to me.
Did that help you during those struggling years where you were a welding salesman for a while? You also, as the title of your book says, you were a cab driver in New York, and you went from cab driver to Carnegie Hall in the same day, basically, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so how did you overcome that psychologically to do your best despite being under, I would call, rather challenging circumstances?
I don't know. I had something inside of me I just felt like I was destined for something better. Not that there's anything wrong with driving a cab. I mean, it could be a great job.
No, of course not. But you didn't set out to be a cab driver. You set out to play clarinet and play it at a high level.
Right.
And so being a cab driver is challenging to someone whose goal is to be a clarinetist.
I looked at it as an opportunity to make a living and be able to stay in the game, sort of. I mean, I wasn't working very much, but in terms of music, but to be around long enough and then play a recital in the Metropolitan Museum, and then got a great New York Times review, and things then took off for me too. But yeah, I didn't look at it as, oh, poor me. I had a family, I had a daughter, and I had to make money. And so my grandfather, he was a painter. And so he was actually a professor. He was a highly learned man, in Russia. He told people, asked him what he did for a living, and he said, "I'm a painter." Like he was, Monet or something. I'm a painter. He painted prisons and houses. That's what he did, and he was okay. I mean, that's what he did. So there's no time to feel sorry for yourself. You got to go out there and do it.
I think the listeners should really pay attention to that, particularly that you do what you need to do in order to get to where you're going. And sometimes that means you're doing something that you really didn't set out to do. It may not be your passion at all, but you sometimes have to do those things. I myself have been through long periods of time where I've needed to work on other things to pay the bills. And that's just the way that works. But if you have it in your gut and your soul that you're going to be in the business that you want to be in, whatever that is, then you keep doing what you're practicing to do.
One thing that really helped me was I read a book called "What Color Is Your Parachute?" By Bowles, Richard N. Bowles or something, which really was a series of games that you would fill out the answers to, and then the book, based on your answers, would say to you, this is the area that you express the most passion for. And for me, it was music and young people. And so I developed a music program. My daughter was in nursery school at the time, for getting the kids actively involved with making up lyrics to songs, making up dances based on their natural movements, what they like to do. There are things that you can do. It's not of my creation. It was a guy named Karl Orff in the 1920s who had this thing called Orff Schulwerk. He had a whole program based on giving children the opportunity to become actively involved with music, as opposed to being taught another Kumbaya song or whatever, and they're told how to sing the song, they're told the lyrics, and they have to just mirror what they're taught. So this was a different kind of program. So through that enabled me to get out of my welding job and ultimately paved the way for my daughter and me to go back to New York.
I think I need to ask you an important question about the clarinet itself. You talk for quite a bit in the book about reeds. How important are reeds? Why are reeds important? What is it that they do for you? Why do you need them to be a certain way?
So the reed, it's where the sound comes from. It's really where the reed vibrating against the mouthpiece there has to be a vibration, right? So when we speak or when we sing, we go, oh, if we feel our throat, we're feeling our, vocal cords vibrate. There's a vibration, right? Any string instrument, brass, it's the lips. So for the clarinet and the oboe and the saxophone and all of that, the reed is vibrating. Sometimes if it's a double reed, like the oboe and bassoon, they vibrate against each other. For the clarinet, the reed vibrates against the mouthpiece. The tip of the reed vibrates against the mouthpiece, and that's what makes the sound. More of the reed vibrates, and then you have a more deep sound. And that's what I love so much. If you want to play jazz, you have a very open mouthpiece where you can play with a lot of vibrato and do a lot of glisses and that kind of stuff. But the reed and the mouthpiece, if you have a good reed and mouthpiece, you can sound great, well, at least very, very good on a plastic clarinet. You don't even need an expensive clarinet, really. If you're a professional, you want a good clarinet. But the reed and the mouthpiece is what makes the sound.
I find that fascinating. I don't play any instruments, and I'm always interested in what musicians, what they have in their bag of tricks, what they look at, how they think. I think that's very interesting, that the reed is more or less everything to make the sound the way it is. Yeah,
it is. Absolutely.
So I have to ask you, the old joke is, right? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, right? That's the old joke. And clearly you've done that. What is it like to play in Carnegie Hall?
Well, you know the history. I mean, you go backstage before the concert, before your first concert or whatever, and you see Teddy Roosevelt giving a speech on the stage of Carnegie Hall, or the Beatles performing in Carnegie Hall, or Benny Goodman, or the history is there. Actually, in Pittsburgh, you have a Carnegie Hall.
We have two of them actually, but the place where most people would wind up playing, where the symphony plays here, is a place called Heinz Hall. But there are two different Carnegie Halls here in Pittsburgh.
We played it at one of them. So anyway, what's it like to play in this Carnegie Hall? It's just, I can't get away from the history, the stage. You look at the marks on the stage and where did it come from? And so you're surrounded by this history. And so I wonder what my sound is going to sound like in Carnegie Hall. There are other stages that I think maybe there are greater halls, maybe, but just the sound. Symphony Hall in Boston, you can literally whisper like this, and all the way back, you can hear everything someone says whispering.
But were you intimidated the first time you went to play in Carnegie Hall?
A little bit. It was very big, and our group was very small. I mean, orchestras of 100, 120 play there, and we were like 20 musicians at first. It looked very huge. And so how is this going to work? Will we all have to play louder? Do we have to change the way we play? How's that going to work? When I played with Menuhin in Carnegie Hall, that was something, because we walked. I wasn't just walking to my seat in the back of a group. I was walking front and center on the stage, and it was a long walk. It was really a long walk. I mean, it's like walking across the street from where you live. I mean, it's really long, and so that was weird. That was really, and you want to make sure that you're looking around, but you have to make sure that you're not going to trip and make a fool of yourself.
Well, yeah, you're walking. That's what people don't understand about performers. Just the act of walking can be intimidating because everybody's looking at you. And we're not used to having everybody look at us when we walk. But suddenly the focus is on you, and then you're going to play. But that's a whole other story because that you've hopefully practiced your way up to a point where it becomes a second nature thing for you. Just that's what I was curious about, the factor of going into this one of the most famous halls in the world, and you're going to be on stage playing. It's got to be a little bit, get your attention a little bit.
It's sure, absolutely, it's intimidating. Some of the most tense moments in Orpheus happened during a dress rehearsal. We used to rehearse in the morning of our concert in Carnegie Hall. So some of the biggest fights in the orchestra about how we were going to play something after our rehearsals, and at the last minute, no, I really think it should be like this, and then whatever, and and then somebody thought, why don't we have some of the kids were having young children by that time, like toddlers, and so why don't we bring our children to the hall, and they can kind of crawl between the players. And so if somebody gets very upset and they look at this 3-year-old looking up at them drooling, it's a little more context. It's just so that helped a little bit. But
it does. It puts everything into a context, doesn't it? Because it's not that's not really what life is all about. It's not about one thing or the other. It's about all these things.
And while it's not life and death, although for a performer who in the beginning people didn't know us, so it was kind of life and death, but you have to kind of you have to not think of that again, relaxation from fear and all that stuff. It's
every time you performed, if you had screwed up once, that would be forgiven. But if you screwed up twice, 3 or 4 times, and the orchestra was bad and not together, eventually you wouldn't be playing together.
Right. Well, that's absolutely true. Somebody told me that when you go out to play, you really want to put the audience at ease. You want to make sure that they're okay. So when you kind of reverse it and think, oh my God, they're all looking at me, and what am I going to do? No, you go out and your goal is to put the audience at ease, have them enjoy, and also, of course, and that's what I also learned from Stockard Channing. It's all about the music. It's all about the play. It's all about what you're trying to express. That's the most important thing. The other stuff is extraneous. What they think of me, or what am I going to get a review? I had a fight with my wife, or whatever. That's all finished. For don't think about that then. But the music. That's what it's about.
I think that's absolutely fabulous. Well, I have been having just an incredibly wonderful conversation with David Singer, not only about his life and career, but about his book as well. And we're going to wind the show down a little bit. And I'm wondering, in all of your many years of experiences, can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or maybe just plain funny?
This just took place in my second year at Curtis. I just really did not like the city of Philadelphia at the time. I didn't want to be there. My clarinet, I didn't have any good reeds to play. I was practicing. I had my two clarinets out there, and the other clarinet was sort of on a clarinet stand. And I was really wondering, what should I do with my life? Is this really what I want to do? Suddenly, bang, bang, bang at the door. It was the fire marshal. And he said, "Get out, there's a fire. And so I thought about this. I thought about it really hard. And I took my clarinet and I put both of them on the floor of my apartment. And then I ran out outside because there was a fire that was starting and they couldn't control it right then. And I went to the other side of town to my friend's house just to hang out for a few hours until it was. So I figured, okay, if they burn, my clarinets if they're gone, that's God saying to me that I should do something else, because I couldn't afford to have purchased another. So I came back and I could smell the street and I could see the black smoke and broken glass and everything. So I walk up the stairs to the brownstone, went down the hallway, and I opened the door, and there they were. The clarinets were there, untouched, unharmed, no problem. There was black smoke but they were fine, nothing wrong. So I kept going.
So that was the sign. It didn't burn up, so you got to keep going forward, huh?
Well, that's it.
All right, so last question for you today, David. You've given us massive amounts of advice throughout this whole show. Lots of great stuff to chew on for people that are musicians or they want to be musicians and so on. I'm just wondering, do you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those who are starting out in the business? If they come up to you and say, how do I get in? What do you tell people?
So I used to tell my daughter, if you're really tired and you're sleeping and it's terrible weather outside, what is going to inspire you to get out of bed and get dressed and go to work? What would that do? So in other words, what you're really passionate about, what you really love, is what you should do. That's what you should do. Now, Mark Cuban, a very successful businessman, said, no, that's not that completely. Anything that you do well, you're going to like. Anything you do well, you're going to like. So find something that you think you have an affinity for, that you think you might be good at, that you really love, and do that. I mean, so there has to be some kind of a reasoning. I would like to be a baseball player, but not really. It's not going to be good for me. But, if you choose something that you really like, that you think you can be good at, I guess that's the best advice. Now, if you're in the business, if you're doing something, I think that the score, that what I mapped out, will really help you live the best life. I also, and I'm certainly not a fanatic about it, but I have been helped in times when I really didn't know what I should be doing with my life, or when I was driving a cab and there was a gun being held to my head, or just different times when I had this wonderful relationship for years. And then we moved to Europe, and she became an opera singer, and I wasn't able to work. What was I supposed to do? So when I come to these crisis moments, I would pray. I mean, I would just, not just for myself, but what can I do to give something to this world? And what am I supposed to do? Please, help me find what I'm supposed to do. And when I had to fight for custody of my daughter, And I'm not saying that you have to win all the time. And I'm sure God has many more things to do than to listen to me. I don't know. It has, in my life, it has made a difference. It really has.
Well, I think that that's what's helped you along the road. And I think that that's great advice for anybody that's seeking something to help them find their way. And if that's what it is, that's what it is. So I think that's really excellent advice. And anyone who is trying to get in the business, they might need a little prayer along the way. So it's not all about skill. Some of it's a little bit luck. Some of it's a little bit, perseverance with, allowing others to help you along the way. All those things are part of that process. David Singer, can't thank you enough for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. And those of you that want to read about David's life, two things. You can find it through singerclarinet.com, amazon.com, and also the book is called From Cab Driver to Carnegie Hall by David Singer. David, I thank you kindly for being on the show with me today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.